in Washington.
But do you think it will? And the reason I ask you this is because we've heard from a number of CEOs in different industries as well that
You know what? I really miss question period. I really want Parliament to unprorogue. I really miss having some question period going on to make fun of these guys for. We don't get as much exposure to them as we usually do.
said, wait, we don't need tariffs. What we have right now in USMCA or USMA is good enough, and it's working well. But Donald Trump continues on the path that he's on. So do you think that those messages are getting through to the Oval Office?
Well, I would say uncertainty now is starting to affect American businesses. And I think it's going to affect also the stock market, which I know is something that the president care about. You know, when it's Canadians saying that to Americans, you could say, well, obviously we're making the case for Canada. But now what I hear, and last week I was in Washington, I felt that the tone is changing. Is now they're saying this all uncertainty and instability and unpredictability is really affecting our business. And like I said, for the CEO of Ford to come out openly, publicly and say, you know what, you're bringing chaos to our business.
Right.
You're adding cost to our business. You're making North America less competitive. And at the end of the day, American workers are going to pay the price for that, American consumers and American industry. So obviously it seems that now the message that we brought to Washington for months now is resonating more and more, because when they see the tariff being applied, it has an immediate impact.
Thanks, Brooklyn Blade, for the follow. Appreciate it.
On supply chain. I always say the Americans don't buy from Canada because they want to be polite. They buy what they need from Canada. And these supply chain exists for a reason. They've been there for decades, and they make products in North America more competitive. So that's really what you're hearing now from a number of American CEOs.
But with great respect, Donald Trump has been asked about it in the past and the effect that it would have on the American economy. And he says there will be some short-term pain, essentially trying to tell all of those CEOs, look, the greater good here is that we're going to move production to the United States. And when he was asked yesterday about retaliation from other countries, he said, I don't mind, even believing that the tariffs will force companies to set up in the United States instead, moving from Canada. How concerned are you about that?
Well, one is the rhetoric. The other one is the reality. You know, you don't move a smelter like that to another jurisdiction. You cannot
not
move
overnight,
the production.
Not overnight.
You would have to do that over probably a decade.
See, I love they've got this guy back. The other CTV reporter sucked last time. The whole Stephen McKinnon interview, it was the most glazing interview I've ever seen on CTV. I was just like, what the hell is this? Brooklyn, not right now. Sometimes I will be playing games in the future, sometimes when I have extra time. Usually we're just talking about politics and going over news and political commentary. But good morning, Patty. Welcome back. Morning, James, and 2 cents as well.
Okay, and with multi-billion-dollar of investment. But when
don't you think that that's a real consideration?
I don't hear that from CEOs, honestly, because why would we move production? I mean, these supply chain and these investments, first you need the workers, you need the integrated supply chain, you need the energy. I was just with one CEO recently telling me, you know what, how many nuclear reactors they would need to even have the energy to...
Rob in the chat, Canada needs its own form of DOGE. Well, if that was going to happen, Rob, who would you want to see at the head of that? I'm curious.
Power these new smelters that would be brought in the United States. You're talking about projects that would take over a decade at best to achieve. And what it would do, it would render North America less competitive, because there's a reason why they buy from Canada. We have been their biggest supplier of steel and aluminum for a long time. And therefore, now you hear more and more from U.S. CEOs that understand these integrated supply chain. Think about defense.
Luca.
This is not a small thing. You're affecting the supply chain of the defense industry in the United States at a time where we need to increase our industrial capacity in order to meet the challenge.
I don't disagree with what you're saying,
but military spending.
But he doesn't seem to care about that. Donald Trump doesn't seem to care about affecting the supply chains. He wants those supply chains not to be integrated with another country, but to be just at home in the United States, even if it seems, this is what our read of is him, is that it doesn't matter if it takes 10 years, that's what he wants.
Well, I can tell you, the impact on U.S. consumers, the impact on U.S. workers, the impact on U.S. industry, I think is going to be loud and very loud as the days and the weeks and the months are coming, because they see no alternative to what exists today. because we have been saying, and you've heard that many times, that parts in an auto in a vehicle would move like 6 to 7 times across the border. That the steel we make in Windsor is essential for the industry. That the aluminum we produce is essential for the aerospace industry. When you talk to folks who have to build these things, they really understand that bringing chaos. Those are not my words. Imagine, this is the words of the CEO of Ford Motor Company, who said, the measures are bringing cost and chaos to the industry, and it's only going to benefit foreign workers and certainly other nations. So I think in these circumstances, I think that Americans talking to Americans and saying this is hurtful, as we have been saying for a long time, that these tariffs would be hurtful. And you cannot lump Canada with the rest of the world, because Canada is integrated in terms of supply chain with the Americans, and there's a good reason for that.
Yeah, we have a very unique relationship with America. Like, not quite a relationship like this doesn't quite exist anywhere else in the world. Like, maybe it does, but I don't think to the same extent, with the lack of security that we used to have until recently. Honestly, until the events of the last 30 years, security between the border was pretty lax. You could easily go back and forth most of the time. Like, yeah, you needed a passport, but that was pretty much it. From when I talk to people who have experience going back, back and forth in the 80s compared to now, they're just saying it's drastically different. And Canada is a unique country because we are so large with such a small population, right? And that has kind of been our biggest hurdle our entire existence. Is just our we're so big, we have so much natural resources, but we don't have the manpower to harness it all, right? And that's kind of why we've always been big on bringing in lots of immigration, lots of people from other countries, because that's how we were able to do so well for so long, and having this relationship with the U.S., right? So to have that in jeopardy, to have our immigration system be the way it is right now, where it's just not being maintained properly, it's kind of leaving us in a very weak position, in my opinion. But anyways, back to my earlier question, where you guys were saying, some of you were saying Elon and Trump, you'd want them to run Canadian DOGE as well. Yeah, I don't know. I personally, I wouldn't mind having something like that, but I wouldn't want one singular person in charge of it. I'd rather have like a group of people in charge of something like that. Just because I feel like there's a lot of power in that. And not to mention, it's kind of something that like Mark Carney's even all for, right? Like, he's talked about giving corporations a conscience, whatever the hell that means, right? Hey, Robin, welcome back. And Genghis, welcome back, buddy.
That's how we can make the best vehicle in the world.
So tomorrow we know that Dominic LeBlanc, finance minister, is supposed to meet with Howard Lutnick in Washington, D.C., the nominee for Secretary of Commerce. What do you hope is the number one message that Mr. Lutnick gets from Mr. LeBlanc?
We want to bring back certainty. We need to bring back business confidence. We need to bring back consumer confidence. We need to understand the rules of the game. People, businesses, union leaders, Canadians, we want to understand, okay, what are going to be the rules under which we can engage with our partner in the United States. And I think I would say over the last few weeks, we've seen that the rules of the game have changed. Now we need to understand, okay, under which rules do you want to play? Because when we know the rules, we know how to win. We know how to organize ourselves. And I think this has been a big wake-up call for Canada. People have never been talking more about a free trade agreement among all the provinces in Canada. A Canada First procurement policy, as I've said. Let's make sure.
And maybe that's one good thing that'll come of this, is we'll lax on the interprovincial tariffs. Like, that's something that, honestly, are we really doing anything for ourselves with that? Like, is that really helping anybody? Or is that helping the nation as a whole? Like, they talk so big on unity. They've been in power for 10 years. They didn't think about maybe uniting the country a little more, or uniting the economy a little bit more. You know what I mean? Making it more competitive. And that's the thing, right? Is like, tariffs actually reduce competition, right? Like, it's yes, it can improve domestic production, but having an open market increases competition, right? That was the idea of it. That was why we got put into this position originally. I agree, though, we shouldn't rely solely on our essentials from countries overseas. Like what we saw during the pandemic, where we have, like, we rely on, countries in Asia like China for like our 80% of our vitamin C, a bunch of our antibiotics, a lot of like essential items, right? And I think that leaves us open to be vulnerable. However, having an more open market when it comes to basic goods during a time that's not an emergency, I don't think there's a problem with that.
That we favor our Canadian companies. Let's diversify our industry. I'm always reminded CDL, which was the industry minister in 1945, reshape the Canadian landscape in terms of industrial base so we can diversify our economy, we can diversify our exports, because Canada is the only G7 country which has a free trade agreement, all the other G7 nations. But we can also diversify our imports. And I said that to our American friends. I said, by the way, we buy more from you, the Americans, than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. We can also decide to diversify our imports if we need to go.
Which will shoot up the costs, of most items, unless we get it from China. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that I think people need to keep in mind is like, we're not going to be, buying most of our goods from people in the UK or, most democratic countries. We're going to be buying it from like China, because that's the only way we're going to keep prices the same, or similar, is by buying the cheapest options.
There.
But that doesn't seem to get through to him. And the reason I say to that is because he had said that he would give great consideration to a possible carve-out or not putting those types of tariffs on steel and aluminum from Australia, because he said that they have a trade deficit with the United States. The way he sees the numbers with us is that we have a trade surplus with him. So what do you do to get through to President Trump to make sure that Canada is exempt from this? Because we know the deadline is coming up in about a month here.
Well, I would say there's other reasons around Australia, in my view, but we can get into that one day. I think it's related to defense. But I would say the best way to get the message through is to union leaders, to workers, to U.S. CEOs, to people like governors. I mean, remember, have you seen the governor of Kentucky's interview? I mean, you should watch that. Yeah. Governor of Kentucky said, hold on for a minute. That thing was a week ago. He said, farmers are calling me now. Distilleries are closing. Orders are being canceled. What's going on? He said,
but that hasn't changed what Trump is doing.
Well, no, but I think there's more and more voice. That I can say to you, Mike, from where we started to today, I see more and more voice. We said, I remember the governor said, I thought this was about Canada. Why are people in Kentucky now have to pay for policies in Washington? Why should the economy of Kentucky go into recession? We're hurting. So I think that the position we've been taking to stand firm, we've done that with provinces. What we've done at the LCBO and across a number of stores have been seen. This was very visible. I was in Washington. People said, oh my God, what's going on? You guys are withdrawing American products. We said, not by choice, by necessity, because you're threatening us with tariffs. So I think what we need to do as Canadians is be united, speak with one voice, be firm. And I would say on the other end, let's be ambitious, let's be confident, and let's build the Canada that we want, to make sure that we are more resilient amongst ourselves. And I think if there was a time to do it, is now. And I think Canadians are ready for that.
We're running out of
time. What is Ottawa's plan to escape these latest tariffs, and what is the strategy to stop the threats for good? François-Philippe Champagne is the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry. Minister, thank you for being here today.
Pleasure to be with you.
Perhaps, but I think I was also the bearer of bad news just there about the stacking tariffs. As I said, CBC News having learned that on top of the potential for these 25% tariffs on virtually everything, 25% on steel and aluminum. Has anyone from Washington passed that information along to you, or are you learning it from us?
Allow me to focus on what we know for sure, because one thing we've learned in the last few weeks is to focus on what is signed by the president. If that's what you've heard from the White House, let's wait until things are confirmed, because
at the same time, Donald Trump is saying no exemptions, no exceptions. How confident are you that Canada can get one, given that he has explicitly said that won't be the case?
Well, we have a history with them when it comes to tariff. You remember on steel and aluminum last time?
It lasted almost a year last time.
In 2018.
Yeah.
But they realized two things. They realized that we were firm in our response, and that these tariffs would impact U.S. industry.
Yet they did it again.
Yeah, they did do it again. Thank you for saying that, CBC. I was just about to say that. She said...
Well, listen, and that these tariffs would impact U.S. industry.
Yet they did it again.
Well, listen, different time.
This is what we're trying to say. Is like, come up with a new idea. Think of something. Like, it's just like this idea of just complaining about it. What is it solving? What is it doing?
Now, more than ever, honestly, sometimes you have to say to our best friend in the United States and our ally, if you say no to Canada, who are you going to say yes to? The world is watching. this is very serious. And why I'm always coming back to the point of shipbuilding, of defense, is because those are key industries at a time where there's more turbulence in the world. We need to make sure we shore up our manufacturing capability. We talk a lot about military expenses that we'll have to do. I would call that investment. But in order to do that, we need to build up our capacity, our industrial capacity. But one thing, Canadians are resilient. C.D. Howe in 1945 reinvented the industrial landscape of Canada. So, there's many things we can do in this country. We have a Canada Free Trade Agreement that we can do and that we're working on. We can have a Canada First procurement policy, so we favor Canadian company. We can diversify our industrial base. We've done it before in 1945. We can diversify our exports. We're the only G7 with a free trade with all other G7. And we can diversify our imports, because I always tell them, by the way, we buy more from the Americans than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. We can buy from others as well. We can buy locally, but also from other markets.
I want to talk about not only how you'll respond in terms of policy that you've clearly laid out there, but you said yesterday Canada's response to tariffs would be clear and calibrated when it comes to the question of counter-tariffs.
It'd be clear and calibrated. You can tell right now. He's like, oh, crap, I said that.
And I appreciate weeks to go. We're not there yet. But if indeed we are facing this, is your argument right?
Yeah, I'd love to see those quotes, Luca, of the book, because, I just have a hard time saying he's outlining his hate. He has a hard-on hatred for the West. That, show me the quotes. I'm still listening to the book. I just take it as kind of like an ideologue. He looks at himself like he's somewhat of like an elitist above everybody else. That's what I get from him so far, reading his book or listening to the audiobook that he's narrating. However, I'm only on chapter 5. He did kind of speak in favor, but criticized Karl Marx. He does the same thing with Lenin. He tries to say the pros and cons of what they did, essentially is what he's doing. But yeah, please post him here. Okay, yeah, sure. Post them in. The exact quotes, please.
Now, dollar for dollar retaliation on these steel and aluminum tariffs, or are you does clear and calibrated mean something more targeted than dollar for dollar?
We are prepared to have a very robust response, but
so we
hope no. But I just say our mission today is to prevent the tariff, is to do what we did last time. You don't want to escalate.
Hey.
You didn't prevent them.
They're solved.
No, but at least they're suspended.
Hey, what's up?
Not pretty quick.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
For 30 days. We hope we're not going to have to go there. We're going to negotiate with them to provide, you cannot treat Canada like any other country, because the American industry, and I saw the interview before, but the reality, if you talk to CEOs, remove the politicians from the equation. If you talk to people who have to build stuff, if you talk to union leaders who know their members, they'll tell you, they don't buy from us just to be nice. They need that, because if they're importing from Canada steel and aluminum, it's because they need it for their own industry to be competitive and also to make America more secure in their supply chain.
I'd like to zoom out and just understand a bit how you think of the big picture. Fox News, Trump saying if there's no deal with Canada, he will also put 50 to 100% tariffs on Canadian cars. He's mentioned semiconductors. Is this, to your mind, the economic force that Trump was talking about when he said he would use economic force to make Canada a 51st state? Are we already
the sanction tariffs?
Listen,
force?
We're taking it step by step, day by day, like you, in a way that we've seen. And by the way, it's not just Canada. I was talking to some partners around the world. People are watching because things are evolving.
He's pretty fixated on us, though.
Yes, but one thing
honestly, I kind of like this reporter. She's just making him question himself. You can see it in his face. Does this look like a man who's confident right now? Or does it look like a man who's doubting himself?
This guy never seems confident.
To say is that by doing that, by bringing more uncertainty and insecurity and instability in the market, this is going to affect U.S. Markets. It's going to affect U.S. consumer and U.S. industry. That's the kind of voice you start hearing and say, that kind of...
Yeah, he basically did a whole media tour. So he's did CTV, we watched earlier, and then he's on CBC. And he's basically just complaining the whole time while being grilled. He's just complaining, saying, well, it's Trump's fault. We don't know what to do. That's basically what he's saying. It was what I get.
It looks like a dog that would hide behind its owner whenever it sees another
everyone
dog.
Was calling. I'm trying to figure out who called him a Chihuahua first. It was either Canadian Looney or Northern
I can't
Perspective.
unsee it now. Whoever.
We got multiple people saying Northern Perspective called him it first. So I'm just curious Whoever came up with that deserves a coffee.
Spot
I
on.
think.
Approach
He does look like a
to the
chihuahua.
best friend and ally of the United States. The world
He
is
kinda
watching.
sounds like
if you're
one,
going to
too.
do that to your best friend and your best ally, obviously the world is going to be looking at that and say, you know what, we probably need to diversify. We probably need to form other partnership. And I think on our end, we will always trade with the Americans. But one thing that has happened is that the rules of the game have changed. And you know what? What he's done is galvanized Canadians. It's kind of a wake-up call for our country. Now we say things that look impossible are going to be possible. A free trade agreement, making sure that we have like a Canada first procurement policy, that we diversify our industry, our market. I think that he's galvanized. I've never seen Canada more united than today. And that show of force.
Honestly, they've been pretty united on just hating you guys for a while. Honestly, like 80% of Canadians just despised your whole party until very
This is
recently.
not very. Yeah, I feel like that's a more uniting thing is throwing Trudeau out right now.